Frank Adler is trying to get his niece Mary out of her room. She opens the door disappointed, as she hates the dress she's wearing for her first day at school. They live in a small house with their one-eyed pet cat, Fred. Mary is not interested in going to school, and says he can keep homeschooling her. Frank refuses as he already taught her everything he knew. Frank drops Mary at the bus stop, and wishes her good luck. While heading back, he was spotted by his neighbor Roberta, but he ignores her. She follows him to his house, and urges him to bring Mary back from school before it's too late. But Frank wants to stick to his decision as Mary had no friends of her age and no social skills. Roberta is worried about Mary, because someone could take her away from them. Mary gets bored on her first day at school, as she was being taught basic maths by Ms. Bonnie Stevenson, while Mary knows advanced math. She expresses her displeasure towards Ms. Bonnie for asking silly questions, so she makes Mary stand up and ask some advanced questions for her age, but Mary gives the right answer to each one of them, surprising Ms. Bonnie. Mary also solves a multiplication problem and even gives the square root of the number. Later, Principal Davis enters the room, and Mary shouts at her to call Frank and get her out of that class. After school, Frank arrives to pick Mary up. Bonnie goes after them to meet Frank. She tells him that Mary is incredibly good at math, and thinks she might be gifted. But Frank cuts in and tells her that Mary studied the Trachtenberg, a method to solve problems rapidly. Bonnie isn't convinced as Mary is still 7, but Frank claims he learned that method at 8 and he is not gifted. Bonnie later checks up on the Trachtenberg method to see what Frank was talking about. Frank takes Mary out for a day while he fixes a boat, where he tells she should not yell at her principal. Mary apologizes, and asks him to take her for a ride on that boat, and he does. One day, Bonnie conducts a math test and hands students the question paper, and Mary completes it in no time, but this time Bonnie is prepared, and hands Mary an advanced math paper. Mary takes her time and completes it too. Bonnie learns she is gifted. Later, she tries to find more about Frank, but comes across Mary's mother and Frank's sister, Diane. She gets to know Diane was a brilliant mathematician, and she committed suicide 6 years ago. That evening, Bonnie goes to a bar that Frank visits regularly, and confronts him for not telling the truth about Mary. Frank explains that one night Diane suddenly showed up with 6-month-old Mary. She wanted to talk with him, but told her he will after he returned, and leaves for a date. Later he returned home and found Diane on the bathroom floor. Frank regrets that he should have stopped and listened to her, and he has been raising Mary ever since. Bonnie then asks about Mary's father, and learns Diane was socially awkward and ended up with a wrong guy, who didn't even last a month. Their mom turned her back on Diane after learning she got pregnant, as she didn't fit into her requirement. Mary is on the school bus, and notices her classmate Justin walking in with a zoo diorama, and she finds it better than the one she made. Another kid named Ricky trips Justin and causes him to break his diorama, and makes fun of him in front of the other kids. Mary feels bad for Justin and yells at Ricky for what he did, and when he asks what's she gonna do about it, Mary grabs a book from another kid and whacks Ricky in the face, breaking his nose. Frank is called by the principal who wants to expel Mary, but upon Bonnie's request she suggests the Oaks Academy for Gifted Education for Mary, and offers full scholarship, as they think it would be best for Mary. But Frank refuses, because his family has history with such schools. Frank wants Mary to have a normal childhood, and says she will stay in that school, unless they want to kick her out. Principal Davis decides to take a closer look at every detail of Mary. The next day at school, Mary apologizes to her class for hitting Ricky, and takes the chance to mention that Justin's diorama was the best art project, and applauds for him. That evening, Frank and Mary are visited by his estranged mother, Evelyn. She gifts Mary a laptop. As she got to know Mary likes mathematics, she suggests that she download Charles Zimmer's print book for advanced algebra, but to her surprise, Mary had already read it and got ahead of it. While Evelyn tries to pursue Mary, Frank makes Mary to tell her goodbye and brings her out. Frank figures out that Principal Davis had informed her about Mary. Evelyn then criticizes Frank for leaving his job as assistant professor to repair boats, and for his way of living. She thinks Mary is not being raised in the right environment, and also not getting a proper education that matches her potential. Evelyn wants to take Mary with her, and claims she is doing that for Mary's best interest, but Frank disagrees as Diane didn't want her to have Mary, and also wanted Mary to have the childhood she didn't have. Evelyn then asks what would Diane think if she saw how Mary is living. Frank is worried as she will bury Mary with tutors, and will do the same what she did with Diane. After all the disagreements, Evelyn decides to fight for Mary's custody. At court, Frank is represented by a local lawyer Greg Cullen, while Evelyn brings in her lawyer Aubrey Highsmith. Highsmith argues that Frank illegally took the custody of Mary, and they live in unclean and unhealthy conditions and requests to grant Mary's full custody. Later, Cullen defends Frank as it's his sister's decision to raise Mary, and says their living condition is fine. The court orders to check out their living condition, and also grants Evelyn a reasonable time to be with Mary. That evening, Frank leaves Mary with Roberta, and goes to the bar for a drink, where he meets Bonnie. She tells him that she isn't the one who informed about Mary to Evelyn, and Frank tells her he knows. Later they have fun talking and drinking together, and eventually Frank brings her to his place. Bonnie was initially hesitant, but couldn't resist and they end up making love. That morning Mary unexpectedly returns to the house, and finds Bonnie wrapped herself in a bedsheet. Bonnie eventually leaves after being extremely embarrassed. Frank scolds Mary as she wasn't supposed to be there. Later Frank apologizes as it's not her fault. Mary thinks Frank is unable to have a personal life because of her. Later, he checks the mail and finds a letter from Evelyn's lawyer, and Evelyn takes Mary to Boston for a couple of days. She shows Mary the pictures of her mom. Later she introduces Mary to the millennial problems, and one of them is the Navier-Stokes problem, which her mother Diane tried her entire life to solve it, but failed. Evelyn then takes Mary to her colleague, Seymour Shankland, to solve an equation. Mary takes a look at the equation longer than usual. Meanwhile, Shankland thinks she is incapable, as she is not even able to comprehend it. As Evelyn takes her away with disappointment, Mary states the equation was not that hard to solve, and reveals there was a mistake in the equation. Evelyn takes her back to Shankland, and she solves the equation herself. The next day, Evelyn drops her at Frank's house. Mary was taken to a psychologist named Pat Golding, followed by the court order. Mary says she likes Evelyn, but doesn't want to live with her as she is bossy. Mary makes him promise that he will never leave her. Pat learns about Mary's life, and was surprised to learn Roberta is her only friend and doesn't have friends of her age. Mary thinks people of her age are boring. She tells Pat that she and Frank watch UFC fights every Saturday, and she enjoys it as Frank does the grunting and voices. She then tells Pat that Frank is a good person, because he wanted her before she was smart. Over the next court hearing, Mary's biological father Bradley Pollard testifies on behalf of Evelyn. Cullen proves to the court that Bradley never met Mary in his life, and doesn't even know her middle name. The judge rules against Bradley for any sort of custody. Mary breaks down in tears after learning her biological father lives in the same town, but never bothered to visit her. To cheer her up, Frank and Roberta take Mary to the hospital, and they see a family waiting for the birth of a new child. When they learn that a boy has been born, the family cheers. Frank tells Mary that this is what it was like when she was born, and it was him who stepped out to deliver the news. During the next hearing at court, Cullen presses Evelyn on how she controlled Diane's life and how she restricted her from enjoying little things. Cullen also reminds how she separated Diane from her boyfriend, and pulls out a hospital record of Diane who attempted to take her own life. Evelyn doesn't show any remorse, and defends her actions, telling she did that for Diane's best interest. Later, Highsmith grills Frank as he testifies that he currently freelance boat repairs, and has no health insurance. Highsmith point out he is no position to be a guardian, as he also spent a night at jail for assaulting a man. He further says Frank's going personal against Evelyn as he didn't get the attention like Diane, and using Mary as a pawn. Highsmith claims that Frank is ruining Mary's potential future. Cullen later shows up at Frank's house, and tells him that he and Highsmith came to an agreement where Mary would be placed in foster care, and when she reaches the age of 12 she can decide where to live. Cullen suggests Frank to take the deal, as the judge is old school and will rule in the favor of Evelyn. Frank meets the foster parents and sees that they have a pleasant home and family. He leaves Mary there, she begs him not to leave her and they have a tearful goodbye. Frank walks away heavy-hearted as Mary cries and screams for him. Few days later, Frank tries to visit Mary, but the foster father tells him that she doesn't want to see him. Meanwhile, Bonnie comes across a flyer of Mary's cat Fred put up for adoption. She sends the picture to Frank, and he quickly goes to the animal shelter, and learns someone left Fred there because of an allergy issue. He learns it's Evelyn, who was allergic to cats. Frank gets Fred back, and adopts 2 more cats as well. Frank picks up some stuff, and heads to the foster home with Roberta. He finds Evelyn in the guest house with Mary and also had 2 tutors. Mary is angry at Frank and runs away. She eventually breaks down and hugs him. Frank then goes to Evelyn and presents her with something she is not aware of. It turns out Diane solved the Navier-Stokes problem. Evelyn thinks it's fake and Frank is playing a trick. She says Diane would have published if it was completed. Frank reveals that Diane had requested not to have the work published until after Evelyn's death. Frank says she can publish it if she gives up the custody of Mary, or it remains unpublished until her death. Evelyn finally agrees, and Frank leaves with Mary. Mary is back in the custody of Frank and attending the Oaks Academy for Gifted. Frank picks her up after school and brings her to the park, where she can join Bonnie and have fun playing with other kids of her age. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to watch more videos like this.